It's just a formality.
Why does this feel wrong?
You're thinking too hard.
Who is she? You knew I'd sign without reading.
Ethan slid the papers across the kitchen table with a calm smile. It's just a formality. Julia, he said, like he'd said 100 things before that I never questioned. I picked up the pen, but something made me pause. I glanced at the top of the page, and that's when my chest tightened. Because above my name was another woman's, Madeline Carter. My fingers went cold. My heart didn't just race, it dropped. Slowly, I looked up at my husband, and the way he avoided my eyes told me everything I wasn't ready to know. If you're already feeling that tension, imagine being in Julia's place. Tell me in the comments, would you sign? Or would you stop right there? And if you enjoy emotional stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support means more than you know. If you had asked me a year ago whether I trusted my husband, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have smiled, maybe even laughed, and said, with everything. That was the version of me who still believed that love once built carefully enough couldn't crack. That if you chose the right person, the right life would follow. Ethan Price was that right person. We met 12 years ago at a mutual friend's 4th of July barbecue in Westport, Connecticut. He was the kind of man people noticed without him trying sharp suit even on a casual day. Steady voice, the kind of confidence that didn't need to be loud. I remember thinking he felt safe. Not exciting in a reckless way, not unpredictable, safe. And at 30, after a few messy relationships, safe felt like everything. We built our life quickly after that. Within 2 years, we were married. Within 4, we had Lily. By the time she turned 10, we were living in a quiet tree-lined neighborhood where every house looked like it belonged, in a magazine white siding, big windows, a lawn that always seemed perfectly trimmed no matter the season. It wasn't just the house, it was the life. Ethan's business took off around the same time Lily started school. He moved from working long hours at someone else's firm to launching his own real estate investment company. I remember the night he told me, pacing in the kitchen, excitement and fear mixed in his voice. I just need your support, he said, and I gave it to him without question. I left my job at a small marketing agency not long after. At first it was supposed to be temporary, just until his company stabilized, just until Lily adjusted to school. But 1 year turned into another, and suddenly I wasn't just supporting Ethan. I was depending on him. He handled everything financial. Mortgages, taxes, investments, insurance. At some point, I stopped asking questions because every time I did, he'd smile gently and say, "You don't need to worry about that, Jules. I've got it." And I believed him because he always seemed to have it under control. Bills were paid on time. Our savings grew. We went on vacations, nothing extravagant but comfortable. Martha's Vineyard in the summer. A ski trip to Vermont one winter where Lily learned to snowboard, and Ethan stood at the bottom of the slope, cheering like she'd just won the Olympics. Those were the moments I held on to, the ones that made everything feel real. But looking back now, there were things I ignored, little things. The kind you brush off because they don't fit the story you've already decided to believe. Like how Ethan always preferred documents emailed to him instead of mailed to the house. Or how he'd occasionally step outside to take a call even if we were in the middle of dinner. Or how whenever I asked about specifics like the details of our mortgage refinancing 2 years ago, he'd answer just enough to satisfy me, then shift the conversation. At the time, it didn't feel suspicious. It felt efficient. He was busy, important, handling things I didn't fully understand anyway. That's what I told myself. That's what I wanted to believe. Lily never questioned him either. She adored her father. At 15, she was at that delicate age where everything felt intense friendships, school pressure, figuring out who she was. But Ethan had this way of grounding her. He'd sit with her at the kitchen island, going over her math homework like it was the most important meeting of his day. "You're smarter than you think," he'd tell her, and she'd light up. Sometimes I'd watch them from the doorway, feeling this quiet warmth settle in my chest. This is it, I'd think. This is what people mean when they say they have a good life, even when things started to feel off. It wasn't one big moment. It was a shift. Subtle at first. Ethan began coming home later than usual. Not drastically, maybe an hour here, 2 hours there, but enough that dinner started happening without him more often than not. Client meetings, he'd say, loosening his tie as he walked in. Things are picking up. I nodded because that made sense. His business had been growing. Then there were the weekends. He used to be present, really present. Saturday mornings were for coffee on the back patio, Lily doing homework nearby, me flipping through a magazine, or planning the week ahead. But slowly, those mornings disappeared. He'd take calls, step away, leave the house for quick meetings that stretched into hours. One Saturday, Lily looked up from her phone and asked, "Is Dad working all the time now?" I forced a smile. Just a busy season, but something about the way she said it lingered, because it wasn't just busy, it felt like distance. The first time I noticed the phone really noticed it was on a Tuesday night. We were sitting on the couch watching a show we'd both been following for weeks. Ethan's phone buzzed on the coffee table, just once, then again. He reached for it quickly, too quickly, and flipped it over before I could see the screen. "Work," he said, casually, already standing up. "I need to take this." He stepped outside. I remember staring at the blank TV screen after he paused it, the room suddenly too quiet. Something inside me shifted, then not fully formed, not loud enough to demand attention, but present. A flicker, doubt. When he came back in, he acted normal. Sat down, hit play, wrapped an arm around my shoulders like nothing had happened. And I let him, because questioning it felt unnecessary, because I didn't want to be that wife, the suspicious one, the insecure one. Weeks passed like that, small moments stacking on top of each other, a late-night text he didn't answer in front of me, a smile at his phone that didn't quite reach his eyes when I asked what was funny, a growing sense that I was standing just outside something I couldn't see, but I kept telling myself the same thing. This is normal. This is what happens when life gets busy. This is what happens after years of marriage. You adjust, you trust. You don't look for problems where there aren't any. And yet, there were nights when I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside me, and feel this quiet, unexplainable unease settle into my chest. Like I was missing something obvious, like there was a conversation happening just out of reach. Still, the next morning, I'd wake up, make coffee, pack Lily's lunch, kiss Ethan goodbye as he headed to work, and push that feeling down again. Because everything on the surface still looked perfect, and when something looks perfect long enough, you stop asking whether it actually is, until the day you can't ignore it anymore, until a single moment, one line on a piece of paper forces you to see everything differently. But that moment hadn't come yet. Not fully. At this point, I was still holding on to the version of my life that made sense. The version where my husband was just busy, where my family was still intact, where trust wasn't something I had to question. And maybe that was the most dangerous part of all, because the truth wasn't something that arrived suddenly. It was already there, waiting, hidden in plain sight. The first real crack didn't come from something Ethan said. It came from something he almost didn't. It was a Thursday evening. Nothing special, nothing that should have stayed in my memory. Lily was upstairs finishing an essay for her English class, and I was in the kitchen rinsing dishes after dinner. Ethan had just gotten home later than usual, again his tie loosened. Sleeves rolled up, that familiar look of controlled exhaustion on his face. "Long day?" I asked, glancing over my shoulder. "You have no idea," he replied, setting his keys down a little too hard on the counter. "We're closing on 3 properties at once. It's chaos." I nodded. That still made sense. It always made sense. He grabbed a glass of water, drank half of it in one go, then reached for his phone as it buzzed in his pocket. And that's when it happened. Not the buzz itself, not even the way he immediately checked the screen. It was the way his expression changed. Subtle, fast, but unmistakable. Something softened in his face, something that didn't belong to stress or business. Before I could process it, he turned slightly away from me, angling the screen out of view. "Everything okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Yeah," he said quickly. Too quickly, just work. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, but his body didn't relax. If anything, he looked more alert now, like he was waiting for something. Or someone. We stood there for a moment in silence, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space between us. Then his phone buzzed again. This time he didn't even pretend to ignore it. "I need to take this," he said, already moving toward the back door. Now I asked the word slipping out before I could stop it. He paused just for a second. Then he gave me a small, almost amused smile. "It's important, Jules." And just like that, he was outside. I don't know why I followed him. I told myself I was just going to close the door properly. It hadn't shut all the way. That was the excuse I gave myself as I walked toward it, my hand hovering over the handle. But when I got close enough to hear his voice through the glass, I froze. I said I'd handle it. He was saying his tone low-controlled, not the professional voice he used on calls I'd overheard before. This was different, more personal. A pause, then softer, almost gentle. "Maddie, just give me a little more time." Maddie. The name hit me like a quiet echo, not loud enough to shatter anything yet, but enough to linger. I stood there barely breathing, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Maddie, not Mr. Thompson, not the client, a name, a woman's name. I stepped back before he could come inside, my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. By the time he walked back into the kitchen, I was already at the sink again, my hands moving automatically, even though the dishes were long finished. "Everything okay?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Yeah," he said, grabbing his glass again. "Just a client being difficult." I turned to face him, searching his expression. "Client named Maddie?" I asked, keeping my tone as casual as possible. For a fraction of a second, just a fraction, his eyes flickered. Then he smiled. "Madeline," he corrected smoothly. "Short for Madison, it's a company rep. You wouldn't know her." The answer came too easily, too clean. "Oh," I said, nodding slowly. "Right." He stepped closer, brushing past me to set his glass in the sink. His hand rested briefly on my lower back, a familiar gesture that usually comforted me. But this time it didn't. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay? You seem off." I let out a small laugh. "I'm fine, just tired." He studied me for a moment longer than usual, like he was trying to read something I wasn't saying. Then he nodded. "Get some rest. I've got a few emails to send." And just like that, the moment was over. Or at least that's what he wanted me to believe. But something had shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that screamed betrayal or demanded confrontation, but enough. Enough that I couldn't unhear that name. Enough that I couldn't unsee the way his face had changed when he read that message. That night, I lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling again. Only this time, the unease wasn't quiet anymore. It had a shape now, a name, Maddie. I turned slightly, watching Ethan as he slept, or at least as he pretended to. His breathing was steady, his face relaxed, the same man I'd shared a life with for over a decade. But now there was a distance I couldn't ignore, a question I couldn't answer, and for the first time I didn't push it away. I let myself think about it, really think. Who was she? Why did he speak to her like that? And why did it feel like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't want to fall into? The next morning I tried to act normal. Coffee, breakfast. Lily rushing around looking for her backpack like she always did. Ethan scrolling through his phone at the kitchen island. Same routine, same life. But now every small detail felt sharper. When his phone buzzed, I noticed. When he angled the screen away, I noticed. When he smiled at something he didn't share, I noticed. "Dad, can you drive me to school?" Lily asked, grabbing a piece of toast. "I can't today," he said without looking up. "I've got an early meeting." "You always have a meeting," she muttered under her breath. He didn't respond, but I saw it again, that flicker of irritation quickly buried. "I'll take you," I said gently. Lily nodded, already moving toward the door. Ethan finally looked up, his expression softening as he watched her leave. "Tell her I'll make it up to her this weekend," he said. I forced a smile. You've said that the last 2 weekends." He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I've got to go." He leaned in to kiss my cheek, but it felt routine, like something he did out of habit, not intention. "I love you," he said. "Love you too," I replied automatically. But as he walked out the door, something inside me didn't settle the way it used to. I stood there for a moment, the house suddenly too quiet again. Then I looked down at the kitchen island, his coffee cup, his keys, and his phone. He'd left it behind. That never happened, not once in years. For a second I just stared at it, my mind racing. This was nothing, an accident. He'd be back any minute to grab it. That's what I told myself. But my feet moved anyway. Slowly, carefully, like I was crossing a line I couldn't uncross. I reached for the phone. My hand hovered over it. Then I picked it up. The screen lit up instantly. No password, just a list of notifications. And right at the top, a message from Maddie. My breath caught. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't. But something stronger than logic pulled me in. My thumb hovered over the screen. And then I tapped. The message opened before I could stop myself. Maddie. Did she sign it yet? For a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then my stomach dropped. It wasn't just the name anymore. It was the question. Did she sign it yet? My fingers tightened around the phone, my pulse loud in my ears. I scrolled up just a little, just enough to see if I was misunderstanding something. I wasn't. There were messages, not many, but enough. Enough to tell me this wasn't about a client, enough to tell me this wasn't new, Ethan. Not yet. I'll handle it tonight. Maddie, you said that yesterday. Ethan, relax. She trusts me. The words blurred for a moment as my vision filled with something hot and sharp. I blinked, forcing myself to focus, to breathe. She trusts me. I set the phone down like it had burned me. For a long second, I just stood there, staring at it like it might somehow take back what I'd just seen. But it didn't. The house felt different now. Colder. Quieter in a way that pressed against my chest. I heard Lily's voice from the hallway. "Mom, are we leaving?" "Yes," I called back quickly, my voice steadier than I felt. Just a second, I grabbed my keys, forcing my mind to move, to shift into something functional. Not now. I couldn't fall apart now. Not in front of Lily. I picked up Ethan's phone again, hesitating for just a second before placing it exactly where he'd left it. Screen down, like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just seen the truth crack open. The drive to school felt longer than usual. Lily talked the whole way. Something about a group project, a girl in her class who wasn't pulling her weight, but her words barely registered. I nodded at the right moments. Smiled when I was supposed to, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Did she sign it yet? The sentence looped over and over again. It wasn't just about another woman. It was about something bigger, something planned. When Lily got out of the car, she paused, looking back at me. "You okay?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. "I'm fine," I said quickly. She frowned slightly. "You seem distracted," I forced a smile. "Just thinking about errands. Go on, you're going to be late." She hesitated, then nodded and closed the door. I waited until she disappeared into the building before I let the smile drop. The second I was alone, the weight of everything settled back in. I drove home slower than usual, my hands tight on the steering wheel. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan's car was gone, but his phone wasn't. I walked inside, my heart beating harder with every step. The kitchen looked exactly the same. Coffee cup, keys, phone, but nothing felt the same anymore. I picked up the phone again. This time I didn't hesitate. If there was truth in here, I needed to see it. I opened the message thread again, scrolling further. There wasn't a long history. Whoever Maddie was, they were careful. But there were enough fragments to piece something together. Maddie. The paperwork has to be finalized before the end of the week. Ethan. It will be. Maddie. You promised me, Ethan. Ethan. I said I'd take care of it. Just don't push. I swallowed hard. Paperwork. The same word he'd used last night. The same formality he wanted me to sign. My hands started to shake. I locked the phone and set it down again, this time more carefully, like I was afraid even touching it might set something off. I needed to think. I needed to understand. Running to confront him now would only give him control. He'd twist it, explain it away, make me doubt what I'd seen. He was good at that. Too good. No, I needed to stay calm. Play this carefully. The sound of the front door opening snapped me out of my thoughts. Jules Ethan's voice called. My heart jumped. He wasn't supposed to be back yet. I took a quick breath, forcing my face into something neutral as I turned toward the hallway. In here, I said. He walked into the kitchen, his expression slightly rushed. I forgot my phone, he said, already scanning the counter. Of course he did. It's right there, I said, nodding toward it. He picked it up, quickly checking the screen. For a split second, I hoped that maybe he'd notice something, that maybe he'd see through me. But he didn't. He just slipped it into his pocket with a small sigh. I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached. I gave a soft, automatic laugh. Busy day, I asked. Always, he said, stepping closer, pressing a quick kiss to my temple. Hey, about tonight. Can we go over those documents? I really need to get them submitted. There it was. The pressure, the urgency. I kept my expression calm. What documents? He looked at me like it was obvious. The refinancing paperwork, the ones I showed you. I tilted my head slightly like I was trying to remember. Oh, right. They're time-sensitive. He added, his tone tightening just a bit. We can't afford delays on this. We can't afford delays. Or you can't afford delays. I nodded slowly. Okay. Tonight. His shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Good, he said. I knew I could count on you. The words landed differently now. Not comforting. Not reassuring. Calculated. He stepped back, checking his watch. I really have to go. Of course, I said. He hesitated for a moment, studying my face. You sure you're okay? He asked. I met his gaze steady this time. I'm fine, Ethan. For a second, something unreadable passed through his eyes. Then it was gone. All right, he said, turning toward the door. I'll see you tonight. I watched him leave, listened to the door close, waited until the sound of his car faded down the street, and only then did I let myself breathe. Tonight. He wanted me to sign tonight, before the end of the week, before I could figure out what was really happening. I turned back to the kitchen table where the papers still sat untouched. Slowly, I walked over and picked them up. This time I didn't skim. I didn't trust. I read. Every line, every clause, every word he thought I wouldn't understand. And with each sentence, the truth became clearer. This wasn't refinancing. This wasn't protection. This wasn't a formality. This was a transfer, ownership, control. Everything we had built being moved away from me. I flipped back to the first page, and there it was again, at the top, Madeline Carter, above my name, not beside it, not below it, above. My hands went still, because now I understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, carefully structured, legally precise. And if I signed, I wouldn't just lose a house. I would lose my place in my own life. I didn't move for a long time. The papers rested in my hands, but it felt like they were holding me in place, instead pinning me to a reality I hadn't agreed to live in. Madeline Carter. The name didn't just sit at the top of the page. It loomed. Every time I blinked, I saw it again. Clean, official, intentional, above mine. I traced the line with my eyes slowly this time, forcing myself to understand what I had missed before. It wasn't just about names being listed. It was about order, priority, control. Her name appeared first in every section that mattered. Ownership rights, transfer authority, beneficiary designation, legal standing, mine followed. Smaller, secondary, conditional, like I was being written out of something I had helped build from the very beginning. A tight, hollow feeling spread through my chest. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where Ethan had smiled and told me this was just a formality. My fingers pressed against the paper, crinkling it slightly. How long had he been planning this? Days, months, years? The thought made my stomach turn. Because plans like this didn't happen overnight. They required time, precision, intention, and trust. My trust. I pushed the papers away and stood up abruptly, pacing across the kitchen. No, I couldn't just sit here and drown in assumptions. I needed to hear it from him. I needed to look him in the eye and ask the question that was already burning through me. Who is she, and what are you doing to me? The rest of the day blurred together. I went through motions I barely remembered: folding laundry, answering a call from the school about Lily's upcoming parent meeting, reheating leftovers I didn't eat. Everything felt distant, like I was watching my own life from just outside of it. By the time evening came, my nerves had settled into something colder. Not panic, not even fear, something sharper: clarity. Ethan came home a little after 7. I heard the garage door open, the familiar sound of his footsteps, the quiet click as he set his keys down. "Jules," he called. In the kitchen, I replied. My voice sounded steady, stronger than I felt. He walked in, loosening his tie, his expression neutral but alert, like he was already thinking ahead to the conversation he expected us to have. "Hey," he said, giving me a quick smile. "You ready to go over the documents?" There it was again, casual, controlled, like this was just another item on a checklist. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I picked up the stack of papers and held them out slightly. "I read them," I said. Something flickered across his face. Not fear, not guilt, just calculation. "That's good," he said smoothly. "Then you know it's straightforward." "Straightforward," I repeated, my voice quieter now. He stepped closer, reaching for the papers. "Yeah, it's just restructuring, protecting assets, standard stuff." I didn't let go. "Then explain something to me," I said, lifting the top page just enough for him to see. "Why is her name above mine?" For the first time, Ethan didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched, thin, tense. Then he sighed lightly, like I had just asked something mildly inconvenient. "Julia," he said, his tone shifting into something patient, almost indulgent. "We talked about this. It's a placeholder." "A placeholder," I repeated. "Yes," he said, nodding. "It's temporary. Legal formatting. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything." I echoed again, my grip tightening on the paper. He reached out again, this time more firmly. "You're overthinking it." There it was. That word. The one that turned questions into flaws, doubt into weakness. I pulled the papers back out of his reach. "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "I'm reading it." His jaw tightened slightly. "It's legal language," he said. "You're not going to understand all of it." "I understand enough," I replied. The air between us shifted, subtle but unmistakable. This wasn't the version of me he expected. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "Look, we don't have time for this tonight. I just need you to sign so I can submit it before the deadline." "There's a deadline?" I asked. "Yes," he said, a little too quickly. "End of the week." I tilted my head slightly. "That's interesting." His eyes narrowed just a fraction. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said carefully, "that someone else seems to be very concerned about that deadline too." His body stilled. Only for a second. But I saw it. "Who?" he asked. I held his gaze. "Maddie," I said. The name landed between us like something solid. For the first time since this conversation started, Ethan didn't have an immediate answer. He didn't smile, didn't deflect, didn't correct me. He just looked at me. Really looked. And in that moment, something inside me broke, because I realized I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't overthinking. I wasn't misunderstanding. I was right. His voice, when it came, was lower. Careful. "Where did you hear that name?" I let out a quiet breath. "From you," I said, on the phone, last night. That wasn't entirely the truth, but it was enough. He held my gaze for a long moment, like he was deciding something, calculating again. Then he nodded slightly, like he had come to a conclusion. "She's a business associate," he said. "We're working on a deal together." "A deal that puts her name above mine?" I asked. "It's not like that," he said quickly. "You're misreading the structure." "Then explain it to me," I pressed. "I just did." He snapped the patience, slipping for the first time. The shift was immediate, sharp, uncontrolled. We both felt it. Silence filled the space again. But this time, it wasn't thin. It was heavy. "I'm not signing this," I said quietly. The words settled between us, steady and unshakable. Ethan stared at me. "What? I'm not signing it," I repeated. His expression hardened. "You don't have a choice," he said. The words were soft, but they hit harder than anything else he'd said. Something inside me went still, cold. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said, stepping closer, his voice low, "that this affects both of us, our future, our financial security. You can't just decide to hold everything up because you're uncomfortable." Uncomfortable, I let out a small, humorless laugh. "You're trying to transfer ownership of our assets to another woman, and I'm supposed to be comfortable with that." "That's not what's happening," he said sharply. "Then what is?" I demanded. He didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, he stepped back, running his hands through his hair. Again, frustration building. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be," he said. "Just sign the papers, Julia. Just sign. Just trust. Just hand everything over, the same pattern, the same control. But not this time." I shook my head slowly. No, the word felt different this time. Stronger. Final. Ethan stared at me for a long moment. Then something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not exactly. Something colder. Something that made my stomach tighten. "Fine," he said quietly. Too quietly. "We'll talk about this later." He turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I stood there, the papers still in my hands, my heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear anymore. Because whatever this was, whatever he was planning, it was bigger than I had thought. And for the first time, he knew that I knew. Ethan didn't come back to the kitchen that night. I heard him moving upstairs, the soft creak of the bedroom door closing, then silence. Not the comfortable kind we used to share, but something heavier, like a wall had gone up between us. I stayed where I was for a while, staring at the papers still clutched in my hands. My heart was still racing, but the sharp clarity I'd felt just minutes ago was already beginning to blur at the edges. "You don't have a choice." The words replayed in my head louder now. Had he really meant it like that? Or had I pushed him there? I set the papers down, slowly pressing my palms flat against the table. No, I knew what I had read. I knew what I had seen. And yet, a familiar doubt crept in, quiet and insistent. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was something about the documents I didn't understand. Maybe this really was just legal language. Complicated, confusing, easy to misinterpret if you weren't trained to read it. Ethan had said that. "You're not going to understand all of it." The thought slipped in so smoothly it almost felt like my own. I let out a slow breath, closing my eyes for a moment. When I opened them again, the papers didn't look as threatening as they had before. Still wrong, but less certain. And that was all it took. That tiny shift, that small crack in my conviction. I gathered the documents, neatly stacking them the way Ethan liked, aligned, ordered, controlled. Then I turned off the kitchen lights and walked upstairs. Ethan was in bed, propped up against the headboard, his laptop open. He looked up as I entered, his expression neutral. Calm, too calm. "You coming to bed?" he asked, like nothing had happened. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Yeah." I changed quietly, slipping under the covers on my side of the bed. The space between us felt wider than usual. He closed his laptop and set it aside. "Julia," he said softly. I turned slightly toward him. "I didn't mean to upset you earlier," he continued. I've got a lot on my plate right now." There it was, the shift, from pressure to apology, from control to concern. I stayed silent, watching him. He reached for my hand, his touch warm, familiar. "You know I would never do anything to hurt you, right?" he said. The question wasn't new. He had asked versions of it before, but tonight it felt different. He wasn't asking. He was guiding, leading me toward an answer. "I don't know," I said honestly. Something flickered in his eyes, brief, almost imperceptible. Then he smiled, soft and reassuring. "Of course you do," he said gently. "Think about everything we've built, everything we have." His thumb brushed lightly over my hand. Why would I risk that? I swallowed, my chest tightening. Because I had an answer to that now. Because I had seen the messages. because I had seen her name. But the words didn't come out. Instead, doubt filled the space where certainty had been. Maybe I didn't understand the full picture. Maybe there was context I was missing. Ethan shifted closer, his voice lowering. "You trust me, don't you?" There it was, the question at the center of everything. I hesitated, just for a second. But it was enough. His expression changed again, subtly, but enough for me to notice. Hurt, disappointment. "You don't," he said quietly. I didn't say that I replied quickly. "You didn't have to," he said. He let go of my hand, leaning back slightly. I just thought, after all these years, that wouldn't even be a question. Guilt hit me instantly, sharp, uncomfortable. "I do trust you," I said, the words coming faster now. This whole situation, it's confusing." "Exactly," he said, nodding. "It's confusing because it's legal, technical, not because it's wrong." He looked at me steadily. "You're letting fear get in the way of facts. Fear. Not intuition, not evidence. Fear." I looked down at my hands, my thoughts tangling. Was that what this was? Fear had I let one name on a document spiral into something bigger than it actually was? Ethan reached for me again, more gently this time. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me." I did. His expression was open now, earnest. "The man I had married. I need you on my side," he said, not questioning me, not fighting me, supporting me. The words settled deep, because that's who I had always been, supportive, trusting, loyal. And now, I was the one creating conflict, the one making things harder. "I'm not trying to fight you," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but that's what it feels like." Silence stretched between us again. Then he added, almost as an afterthought, "We've got a deadline, Julia. This isn't something we can drag out." There it was again. The urgency, wrapped in reason. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. The word left my mouth before I fully processed it. Ethan's shoulders relaxed immediately. "Okay," he repeated. "Okay," I said again, this time more firmly. His smile returned warm, relieved. "That's all I needed to hear," he said. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. "I knew you'd understand." I forced a small smile in return. But inside, something didn't sit right. Not completely, because even as I agreed, even as I told myself this was just confusion, just fear, there was a part of me that hadn't gone quiet. A part that still remembered the message. She trusts me. A part that still saw the name. Madeline Carter, above mine. I turned onto my side, facing away from him. Ethan's arm slipped around me a few minutes later, familiar and grounding. But instead of comfort, it felt like something else, like being held in place. My eyes stayed open long after his breathing evened out behind me, because now the doubt wasn't just about him, it was about me, my judgment, my instincts, my ability to tell the difference between truth and manipulation. And that was the most dangerous place to be, not knowing if you were right or if you were being slowly convinced that you were wrong. I didn't sleep much that night. Even after Ethan's arm settled around me, even after his breathing turned slow and steady, my mind refused to quiet down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same three things repeating like a loop. I couldn't break the message. She trusts me. The name. Madeline Carter. And my own voice saying yes, agreeing, giving in. By morning, I had already made a decision. Not a loud one, not something dramatic or confrontational, something quieter, colder. If Ethan could plan behind my back, then I could look for the truth behind his. I got up early before him, moving through the house like I always did. Coffee brewing. Lily's lunch packed the familiar rhythm of normal life playing out like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because this time, I wasn't just moving through the motions. I was watching, listening, paying attention. Ethan came downstairs around 7, already dressed, already on his phone. "Morning," he said, distracted, barely glancing up. "Morning," I replied, setting a plate in front of him. He muttered a quick thanks, then went back to scrolling. I stood there for a moment, studying him. The same man, the same routine. But now I noticed the details. The way his thumb hovered over the screen before tapping, the slight shift in his posture when a message came through, the way he angled the phone away without even realizing it. Lily came down a few minutes later, grabbing her bag. "Dad, are you driving today?" she asked. Ethan didn't look up. "I've got meetings." Again. She rolled her eyes slightly but didn't push. "I'll take you," I said. She nodded, already moving toward the door. Ethan stood up quickly, grabbing his jacket. "I've got to run," he said. He crossed the kitchen, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "I'll call you later," he added. "Of course," I said. I watched him leave, waiting until the sound of his car disappeared before I let my expression change. Then I turned and went straight for the desk in the corner of the living room. It was where we kept everything: mail bills, random paperwork Ethan didn't bother to organize beyond stacking it neatly. I had ignored it for years, trusting that whatever mattered he had already handled. But now, I started going through it, carefully, methodically. At first, there was nothing unusual. Utility bills, credit card statements, insurance renewals. Everything looked normal, too normal, like it had been curated. I frowned, flipping through another envelope, then another, until I found something different. A statement. Not one I recognized. The bank logo wasn't one we usually used. I opened it slowly, my pulse picking up again. The account wasn't in my name. It was in Ethan's. Only Ethan's. I scanned the page quickly. Transactions, large ones. Transfers I had never seen before. And then a name. Carter Holdings, LLC. My breath caught. Carter. Madeline Carter. My fingers tightened around the paper. This wasn't just a name on a document anymore. It was a connection. A real one. I looked closer, my eyes scanning every line. Payments had been made regularly. Not once. Not twice. Over months. Maybe longer. I flipped through the rest of the statement, my heart pounding harder with every second. There were more. More transfers. More amounts. All leading to the same place. Carter Holdings. I sat back slowly, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a formatting issue. This was real, and it had been happening for a long time. I folded the statement carefully, slipping it back into the envelope exactly the way I had found it. Then I put it aside. Not back where it was. Somewhere else. Somewhere I could get to it again. I stood there for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Then I moved to the next step. The one I hadn't planned, but knew I had to take. I grabbed my keys. The address had been on the statement, not the full one, but enough. Enough to point me in a direction. I told myself I was just going to confirm it. Nothing more. Just information. Just clarity. The drive took about 20 minutes, far enough to feel intentional, close enough to feel dangerous. The neighborhood wasn't like ours. Not bad, just different. Less polished, more private. I slowed as I approached the street listed on the statement, met my eyes scanning the houses carefully. Then I saw it. A modern building tucked slightly back from the road. Clean lines, dark windows. Not a family home, an apartment, or something like it. I pulled over across the street, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. This was it. I didn't know what I expected to see. Maybe nothing. Maybe confirmation. Maybe something I couldn't unsee. I sat there for a long moment, my heart pounding loud enough to fill the silence. Then, a car pulled up. My breath caught. I knew that car. Ethan's. I sank lower in my seat instinctively, my eyes locked on the building. He got out, calm, unhurried, like he had done this 100 times before, like this was routine, like this was normal. He didn't hesitate, didn't look around. He walked straight to the entrance and went inside. No knocking, no waiting. He had access. My chest tightened painfully. This wasn't business. This wasn't occasional. This was familiar, regular. I stared at the door long after it closed behind him, every second stretching longer than the last. Then after what felt like forever, the door opened again, and she stepped out. Madeline. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I knew. She was younger than me, mid-30s maybe, confident, composed. Her hair pulled back neatly, her posture straight, like someone who knew exactly where she stood in the world. She looked around briefly, then checked her phone, and smiled, Not a polite smile, not a distracted one. Something softer, personal. My stomach twisted, because I had seen that smile before, on Ethan. She stepped aside, waiting, and a moment later he appeared beside her. They stood close. Too close. Not touching, but not distant either. Like there was something understood between them that didn't need to be shown. He said something. She laughed softly. Then he reached out, not dramatically, not obviously, just enough to brush his hand against hers. And that was all it took. The last piece. The final confirmation. I looked away, my vision blurring for a second before I forced it back into focus. Because I needed to see. I needed to remember this. Exactly as it was. No excuses, no reinterpretation, no doubt. Ethan wasn't just lying. He wasn't just planning something behind my back. He was living another life, and I was standing outside of it, watching, uninvited, unaware until now. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my breathing uneven, because suddenly everything made sense. The messages, the urgency, the papers. This wasn't just about money or property or legal structures. This was about replacing me. Slowly, carefully, legally. And if I had signed those documents, I wouldn't have just lost control of our assets. I would have handed them over to her. I sat there for one last second. Then I started the engine, because now I wasn't confused anymore, and I wasn't doubting myself. I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to be unprepared. I didn't cry on the drive home. That surprised me. For years, I had imagined that if something like this ever happened, if betrayal ever became real instead of theoretical, I would fall apart instantly, that the weight of it would crush me before I could even process what was happening. But that's not what happened. Instead, I felt clear, cold, focused, like something inside me had quietly shifted from feeling to understanding, because what I had just seen wasn't ambiguous. It wasn't a late-night message I could misinterpret or a line in a contract I could misunderstand. It was real. Ethan, with her, comfortable, familiar, present in a way he hadn't been with me in months. By the time I pulled into our driveway, my hands had stopped shaking. I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the front of the house, the same house I had walked into thousands of times before, the same place that had always felt like home. Now it looked staged, like a set. Something built to look perfect on the outside while something else happened behind the scenes. I took a slow breath and stepped out. Inside, everything was exactly as I had left it. Quiet, orderly, deceptively normal. I walked straight to the kitchen table and pulled out the papers again. This time I wasn't just reading, I was analyzing, line by line, clause by clause, and now that I knew what to look for, I saw it. Not hidden, not exactly, just disguised well enough that someone like me, someone who trusted, would never question it. The structure wasn't just about transferring assets. It was about reassigning control, properties, accounts, investment shares, all of it being shifted under a holding entity connected to Carter Holdings, connected to her, Madeline Carter. My chest tightened, but I pushed through it. Emotion could come later. Right now, I needed facts. I grabbed my laptop and sat down, pulling up everything I could find. Carter Holdings, LLC. At first, the search results were sparse. A basic registration, minimal public information. But I kept digging. Business filings, property records, cross-references, and slowly, the picture started to form. Carter Holdings wasn't just a random company. It was new, less than 2 years old, and yet it already controlled multiple properties, high-value ones, some of them. I froze staring at the screen. I recognized the addresses, not from memory, but from the paperwork Ethan had shown me. Properties, he had said, were investments. Properties I had assumed were part of our portfolio. They weren't. Not anymore. Maybe they never had been. A slow, heavy realization settled over me. This hadn't started recently. This had been happening quietly, piece by piece, long before I ever saw those documents on the kitchen table. Every investment, every deal, every restructure. He hadn't just been building a future. He had been moving it away from me. I leaned back in my chair, pressing my hand against my mouth, because now I understood something even worse. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was strategic, calculated, planned, and that made it harder to accept, because it meant every moment of reassurance, every time he told me not to worry, every time he smiled and said, "I've got it." He had already been lying. I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself. Then I opened them again and kept going. If I was going to face this, I needed to see all of it, no matter how much it hurt. I searched for Madeline Carter next. This time the results were clearer. Professional profiles, a polished headshot, a LinkedIn page, real estate consultant, investment strategist, partner at Carter Holdings, partner. The word lingered, not assistant, not employee, partner. I clicked through her profile, scanning the details. Education, work history, connections, and then a photo, not a professional one, a candid image from some networking event. She stood in a small group, smiling, a glass in her hand, and next to her, Ethan. My breath caught. He looked different in that photo, relaxed, open, his arm resting lightly behind her, close enough to suggest something more than business, but subtle enough to pass as nothing if you didn't know what to look for. But I knew now, and once you knew, you couldn't unsee it. I stared at the image for a long moment before closing the laptop slowly. The silence in the house pressed in around me. This wasn't just an affair. That part, as painful as it was, almost felt secondary now. This was a partnership, a shared plan, a future that didn't include me. I stood up, pacing the kitchen again, my thoughts racing faster now. Madeline wasn't just someone he was seeing. She was part of the structure, part of the system he had built, the one he was trying to move me out of. And suddenly, her message made even more sense. Did she sign it yet? It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't jealousy. It was urgency, because my signature wasn't just a formality. It was the final step, the last piece they needed. I stopped pacing my chest, rising and falling quickly. They. The word felt heavy, because it meant this wasn't just Ethan anymore. It was both of them, working together toward the same outcome, and I was the only one who didn't know. Until now. A sudden thought hit me sharp and immediate. Lily. I turned toward the stairs instinctively, even though she wasn't home yet. Her world, her stability, her future. Everything tied to this house, this life. If Ethan succeeded, what would happen to her? The question settled deep, heavier than anything else, because this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about protection, and that changed everything. I walked back to the table, placing my hands firmly on the surface. The papers were still there, waiting, just like they had been before, but now they looked different. Not confusing, not intimidating, just dangerous. I picked them up again, flipping to the first page, Madeline Carter, above my name. I stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly, something inside me shifted. Not fear, not confusion. Something else. Something stronger. Resolve. Because now I understood exactly what was happening, and more importantly, what was at stake. Ethan thought I didn't understand. He thought I would sign because I trusted him. Because I always had. Madeline thought the same thing. That I was just a step in the process. A signature waiting to happen. But they were wrong. Because the version of me who would have signed without reading was gone. In her place was someone who had seen the truth, and once you saw it, you couldn't go back. I placed the papers down carefully, aligning them just like before, not out of habit, but out of control. Because this time I wasn't reacting, I was preparing, and whatever they had planned, whatever they thought would happen next, I was going to be ready for it. I thought I'd already seen the worst of it. Standing across the street, watching Ethan walk into that building like it was second nature, I told myself that was the moment everything broke. I was wrong, because what I had seen was only the surface. The truth went deeper, much deeper, and once I started looking for it, it didn't take long to find. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat alone in the living room with my laptop open again. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan had texted earlier saying he'd be working late. No explanation, no follow-up. Just the kind of message I would have accepted without question before. Not anymore. This time I used the silence. I went back to Carter Holdings, back to the property records, but instead of just looking at the company, I started looking at patterns, dates, transactions, ownership transfers, and slowly, the timeline revealed itself. 2 years ago. That's when it started. At first it was small. A property purchased under Carter Holdings, then another, each one tied somehow back to Ethan's business. Deals he had mentioned in passing. Projects he had said were too complicated to explain. I clicked through, document after document, my eyes scanning my brain, piecing things together faster now. Because once you understood the intention, everything else fell into place. He hadn't just been investing. He had been redirecting, moving assets out of our shared ownership into something separate, something hidden, something protected from me. My chest tightened as I opened another file. This one was different. Not a property record, a lease agreement. My eyes scanned the names, and there it was again. Madeline Carter, and beneath it, Ethan Price. Together, co-lesses. My breath caught. This wasn't just business. This wasn't just financial. This was personal. I clicked into the details. Address. The same building I had seen earlier. Unit number included. I stared at it, my pulse pounding in my ears. They weren't just meeting there. They lived there. Maybe not full-time. Maybe not officially. But enough. Enough to sign a lease together. Enough to build something behind my back. I leaned back slowly, my hands trembling now despite everything I had told myself about staying calm. Because this was different. This wasn't just betrayal. This was replacement. A second life, running parallel to mine. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temples as the weight of it all settled in. How many nights had he been working late? How many weekends had he been busy? How many times had I sat at home believing I was part of a shared life, while he was building another one somewhere else? The thought made something inside me crack. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. No, I whispered to myself. No, no, no. But the evidence was there. Clear. Undeniable. I turned back to the laptop, opening another document, then another, and each one added another layer. Utility bills, furniture purchases, even a delivery confirmation for a dining table. A dining table. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening painfully, because I could picture it now. That apartment. Not just empty walls, not just a place for meetings, a home, their home. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold something together that felt like it was slipping apart. This couldn't be real. Not like this. Not so complete. Because affairs were messy, emotional, impulsive. This was structured, organized, planned. He hadn't just fallen into something, he had built it piece by piece, while still coming home to me, to Lily, to the life we thought we shared. A sudden wave of nausea hit me, and I moved quickly to the kitchen sink, gripping the edge as I tried to steady myself. My reflection stared back at me in the dark window. Pale, wide-eyed, unrecognizable. Mom, I froze. Lily's voice came from the hallway, soft but concerned. I turned quickly, forcing my expression to shift. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "What are you doing up?" "I heard something," she said, stepping into the kitchen. "Are you okay?" Her eyes searched my face, and for a second I saw myself through her perspective. Something was wrong, obviously wrong, and she could feel it. "I'm fine," I said gently. "Just couldn't sleep." She didn't look convinced. "Is it Dad?" she asked. The question hit me harder than anything else had, because she saw it too. Not the details, not the truth, but the distance, the change. I hesitated, just for a moment. Then I forced a small smile. "He's just busy, sweetheart. You know how work gets." She studied me for a second longer, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Good night." "Good night," I replied. I watched her walk back upstairs, my chest tightening again. Because whatever happened next, whatever truth came out, it wasn't just going to affect me. It was going to affect her too, and that made everything heavier, more urgent. I turned back to the laptop, back to the evidence. because I couldn't afford to look away now. Not when everything was finally coming into focus. I scrolled through the lease agreement one more time, my eyes stopping on the date. 16 months ago. 16 months. That's how long this had been real. Not a mistake. Not a phase. A second life. And suddenly, something clicked into place. All those late nights, all those weekend meetings, all those moments where he had seemed distracted, distant, just slightly out of reach. He hadn't been slipping away. He had already left in every way that mattered, except legally, except financially, except on paper. And that's what the documents were for, not just to move assets, but to finalize the separation, to make it official, without ever telling me, without ever giving me a choice. My hands curled into fists at my sides, because now I understood the full picture. Ethan wasn't planning to leave, not in the way most people do. He wasn't going to have a conversation, wasn't going to admit anything, wasn't going to face what he had done. He was going to erase me, legally, financially, quietly, and if I had signed those papers, I would have helped him do it. I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, the silence pressing in around me again, but this time it felt different, not empty, not uncertain, heavy. Yes, painful, absolutely, but also clear, because there was no doubt left now. No confusion, no second guessing, just truth. And once you had that, you couldn't pretend anymore. I walked back to the table, slowly closing the laptop with a soft click. Ethan's phone buzzed somewhere upstairs. I didn't need to check it. I already knew. He wasn't just living a double life. He was building one that didn't include me. And now, it was my move. I didn't touch the papers again until the next morning, not because I didn't want to, but because I needed distance, clarity. If I kept staring at them through the lens of betrayal, I would miss what mattered most, the details, the structure, the trap. And now, more than anything, I needed to understand exactly how deep it went. The house was quiet when I sat down at the kitchen table again, the early light spilling across the surface. The same place Ethan had stood calm and confident, asking for my signature. The same place I had almost given it. I took a slow breath and opened the folder. This time I didn't skim. I dissected. The first section outlined the restructuring language designed to sound routine, protective, even beneficial. Words like security efficiency, liability shielding, all reasonable, all convincing. But layered beneath it was something else. I flipped to the next page, tracing each line carefully. Ownership percentages, transfer clauses, conditional rights. At first glance, it looked like I would still be part of everything. My name was there. My signature line clearly marked. But the deeper I read, the more that illusion started to dissolve, because every right attached to my name was conditional, dependent, revocable under specific circumstances. And those circumstances, my stomach tightened, were vague enough to be triggered at any time. I turned the page quickly, my heart starting to race again. The next section was worse. It detailed the transfer of management authority, not shared, not balanced, assigned, to Carter Holdings, to her, Madeline Carter. My grip tightened on the paper. This wasn't just about ownership. It was about control, decision-making power, access, authority. Even if my name remained somewhere in the structure, it wouldn't matter, because I wouldn't be the one making decisions anymore. I would be irrelevant, a silent partner in something I no longer had any influence over. I leaned back slowly, the realization settling into my chest like a weight. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't sloppy legal work. This was intentional design, a system built to look fair on the surface while quietly removing me from everything underneath. I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my breath. Then I kept going, because I needed to see all of it, every piece, every angle, every way this could unfold. The final section was the one that made everything click into place. It was labeled Execution and Finalization Requirements, a simple title. Harmless at first glance, but the moment I started reading, I understood. This was the trap. My signature wasn't just approval, it was activation. Once I signed, everything would move forward immediately. Transfers processed, authority reassigned, access changed, irreversibly. There would be no grace period, no reconsideration, no way to undo it once it was done. My chest tightened sharply as I flipped to the very last page. 2 signature lines, one for Ethan, already signed. Of course it was. And one for me, blank, waiting. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind racing, because now the timeline made sense. The urgency, the pressure, the messages. Did she sign it, yet they weren't just waiting, they were ready. Everything was prepared. All they needed was me. A slow, cold realization spread through me. Ethan hadn't been asking. He had been guiding me toward a decision he had already made, a decision that removed me from my own life, quietly, legally, completely. And if I had trusted him the way I always had, if I had signed without reading, I wouldn't have realized what had happened until it was too late. I pushed the papers away, my hands trembling now despite everything, because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was erasure. And that thought hit harder than anything else. Not just that he had lied, not just that he had built something with someone else, but that he had planned to remove me without ever giving me a chance to fight back. A soft sound behind me made me turn. Lily stood in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom," she said gently, "are you okay?" I forced myself to straighten to breathe. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice came out quieter than I intended. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning my face. "You don't look fine." I gave her a small smile, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I just didn't sleep well," I said. "That's all." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Are you taking me to school?" "Yeah," I replied quickly. "Give me a minute." She turned and headed toward the door. I waited until she was out of sight before I let the smile drop. Because the truth was, nothing about this was fine. But I couldn't let her see that. Not yet. Not until I knew what I was going to do. I gathered the papers again, this time with purpose, sliding them back into the folder. Then I stood up, my movements slower now, more deliberate. Because something inside me had shifted again. Not just understanding, not just clarity, something stronger, something sharper. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was thinking ahead, planning. Because if Ethan had gone this far, if he had built something this detailed, this calculated, then confronting him without preparation would be a mistake. He would twist it, control it, use the same calm, confident tone to make me doubt what I already knew, and I couldn't let that happen. Not anymore. I picked up my phone, my mind already moving through possibilities. There had to be a way to stop this, to protect what was mine, what was Lily's, to make sure that whatever Ethan had planned didn't go through the way he expected. I glanced down at the folder one last time, at the blank signature line. And for the first time, it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like power. Because as long as that line stayed empty, they couldn't move forward. They couldn't finalize anything. They couldn't complete the plan. And that meant I still had control. Not of everything. Not yet, but enough. Enough to change the outcome. Enough to fight back. I closed the folder slowly, my reflection faintly visible in the glossy surface of the table. For a moment, I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. She looked different. Not broken, not confused, focused, aware, and something else dangerous in a way I had never been before. Because now I understood the rules of the game, and more importantly, I knew I had been playing it without even realizing it. But not anymore. This time, I would be ready. The hardest part wasn't finding the truth. It was pretending I hadn't. By the time Ethan came home that evening, I had already decided exactly who I needed to be. Not the wife who had just uncovered a carefully constructed betrayal. Not the woman standing on the edge of losing everything. No. I had to be the version of me he still believed in. The one who trusted him. The one who didn't question. The one who would eventually sign. Because that was the only way I was going to see how far this really went and how to stop it. I heard the garage door open just after 6. I was already in the kitchen setting the table like I had done 100 times before. Same routine, same calm, same illusion. "Hey," Ethan said as he walked in, loosening his tie. "Hey," I replied, glancing up with a small smile. He studied me for a second, long enough that I knew he was looking for something. Tension, distance, resistance. But I didn't give him any of that. "Dinner's almost ready," I added casually. His shoulders relaxed, just slightly. "Smells good," he said. Lily came down a few minutes later, and for a while everything felt normal. We ate. We talked about her school project. Ethan even laughed at something she said, the sound familiar enough to almost make me forget everything I knew. Almost. But underneath it all, I was watching. Every movement, every glance, every shift in tone. Because now I understood something I hadn't before. Ethan didn't just lie with words. He lied with patterns, with timing, with control. And if I paid attention closely enough, those patterns would show me everything. After dinner, Lily went upstairs to finish homework, and Ethan stayed behind, scrolling through his phone. I dried the last dish, slowly giving him time to make the first move. He didn't disappoint. So he said, not looking up, "Did you think about what we talked about last night?" There it was. The question. Carefully phrased, casual on the surface, weighted underneath. I wiped my hands on a towel, turning to face him. "Yeah," I said. Now he looked up, really looked, and he asked. I let a small pause settle between us, just long enough to feel natural, not suspicious. "I think I overreacted," I said. The words tasted strange in my mouth, but his reaction was immediate. Relief, not dramatic, not obvious, but there. "I get it," he said quickly. "It's a lot to take in." I didn't understand the structure. I continued, keeping my tone steady. "I think I just panicked when I saw the name." He nodded, leaning back slightly. "That's exactly what I was trying to tell you," he said. "It looks complicated, but it's really just legal formatting." I gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "Yeah. I guess I let it get to me." He stood up, crossing the kitchen slowly. "I'm glad you came around," he said, stopping just in front of me. There was something in his eyes now. Satisfaction. Carefully controlled, but unmistakable. He thought he had me again. "Me too," I said softly, and for a moment, I hated how easy it was to make him believe that. He reached out, brushing his hand lightly against my arm. "We should get it done tonight," he said. "Just so it's off our plate." "Tonight." "Of course." I nodded, but not too quickly. Maybe I said, "I just want to read through it one more time, make sure I actually understand it this time." A flicker of hesitation crossed his face. Gone almost instantly. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Take your time." But his tone had shifted, slightly tighter, slightly more alert. Good. Let him feel just a little uncertainty, not enough to make him suspicious, just enough to keep him from rushing me. "I'll bring it upstairs later," I added casually. He nodded, stepping back. "Sounds good." He turned away, picking up his phone again, and just like that, the moment passed. But I didn't move right away, because something had changed. Not in him, in me. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting to him, I was guiding him, subtly, carefully, but intentionally, and that shift made everything else possible. Later that night, after Lily went to bed, I took the folder upstairs. Ethan was already in bed, his laptop open again. "Ready?" he asked, glancing up. I sat down beside him, opening the folder slowly. "Walk me through it," I said. His expression softened. Confident again, in control. "Of course," he said. And then he started talking, explaining, pointing out sections, summarizing details. And as he did, I listened. Not just to what he said, but to what he didn't. The parts he skipped over, the clauses he simplified too quickly, the sections he avoided entirely. Every gap told me something. Every omission was a clue. I nodded at the right moments, asked small questions, nothing too sharp, nothing too direct, just enough to keep him talking, just enough to let him think he was convincing me. "You see," he said, at one point tapping a section lightly, "this is just about protecting the assets. And the ownership transfer," I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "That's temporary," he replied immediately. "Just part of the structure. Temporary." The same word he had used before. "The same lie," I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. We went on like that for another 20 minutes, him explaining, me listening, both of us playing roles, until finally he closed the folder. So he asked. I looked down at the signature page, the blank line, waiting. Then I looked back up at him. I get it now, I said. His eyes searched mine, and he pressed. I let a small breath out. Let me sleep on it, I said, just one more night. For a second, I thought he might push back, that he might insist, but instead he nodded. Okay, he said. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. Another deadline, another expectation. I smiled faintly. Tomorrow, I agreed. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my forehead. I knew you'd come around, he said. I didn't respond. I just lay back against the pillows, staring up at the ceiling. Because now I had exactly what I needed. Time, information, and most importantly, his confidence. He thought I was back under his control, that I was moving exactly where he wanted me to. But the truth was, I was already somewhere else entirely, and tomorrow he was going to find out just how wrong he had been. I didn't wait until morning. The moment Ethan's breathing settled into that slow, even rhythm beside me, I knew he was asleep, or at least pretending well enough that it didn't matter. I lay there for a few minutes longer, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word he had said, every omission, every carefully controlled explanation. Then I slipped out of bed, quietly, carefully, like I had done 1,000 times before when Lily was younger and I didn't want to wake her. Except this time, it wasn't about protecting sleep. It was about protecting truth. I grabbed my phone in the folder, then moved downstairs, closing the bedroom door behind me without a sound. The kitchen felt colder at night, sharper, like everything in it had edges now. I sat at the table and opened my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. There was one name I had written down earlier that day, one person I wasn't even sure would be available this late, but I didn't have the luxury of waiting. Daniel Brooks. The name had come up in one of the local legal directories when I searched for attorneys specializing in property law and financial disputes. His reviews were solid. His background sharp, experienced the kind of man who didn't miss details, the kind of man I needed. I hesitated for half a second. Then I called. It rang longer than I expected. Once, twice, 3 times. I almost hung up. Then Brooks. His voice was low, steady, alert despite the hour. Hi, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. I'm sorry it's late. My name is Julia Price. I need legal advice. There was a pause. Not dismissive, measured. What kind of advice, he asked. I looked down at the folder in front of me. Property, I said, and asset transfer. Possibly fraud. That got his attention. How urgent, he asked. I swallowed. They want my signature tomorrow. Another pause. Then, can you come in first thing in the morning? Yes, I said immediately. Bring everything you have, he added. Documents, statements, anything connected to this. I will. 8:30, he said. My office is downtown. I'll text you the address. Thank you. I said the words coming out faster now. Don't sign anything, he added. I won't. The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, my phone still in my hand, my heart pounding. That was it. The first real step. Not just understanding, not just reacting, action. I looked down at the papers again, at the carefully constructed language, at the trap hidden beneath it. And for the first time since all of this began, I felt something different. Not fear, not anger, control. Morning came too quickly. Ethan was already dressed by the time I came downstairs, adjusting his watch as he checked his phone. Big day, he said casually. We'll get everything finalized tonight. I forced a small smile. Yeah, I said, tonight. He studied me for a moment like he was checking for cracks. I gave him none. Good, he said, satisfied. I've got meetings all day, but I'll be back early. Sounds good. He kissed my cheek and left, and the second the door closed, I moved. I got Lily to school my movements efficient automatic. She asked if everything was okay again, and I gave her the same answer. I'm fine, but this time I believed it a little more, because I wasn't walking into this blindly anymore. I was walking in prepared. Daniel Brooks' office was exactly what I expected. Clean, minimal, professional in a way that didn't try too hard. He stood when I walked in, extending a hand. "Julia." "Thank you for seeing me," I said. "Let's take a look," he replied, already gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. I handed him the folder. For a few minutes, the room was silent, except for the sound of pages turning. His expression didn't change much, but I watched his eyes. The way they slowed on certain sections, the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at others. When he finally looked up, his gaze was sharp. "Did you sign any of this?" he asked. "No." "Good," he said, setting the papers down carefully, "because if you had, we'd be having a very different conversation right now." My chest tightened. "So, I'm not imagining it," I said quietly. "No," he replied. "You're not." He tapped the top page lightly. "This is structured to look like a standard asset protection agreement. But it's not." "I knew it," I whispered. "It's a transfer mechanism," he continued, "layered through a holding entity so that by the time the ownership shifts, it's legally clean and difficult to reverse." My stomach dropped again, even though I had already suspected it. "And the name?" I asked. "Madeline Carter." "She's not just involved," he said. "She's central." He flipped to another page, pointing to a section I had read but not fully understood. "This clause here gives her controlling interest once the agreement is executed. Not partial, controlling." My breath caught. "Meaning?" "Meaning," he said calmly, "that once you sign, she effectively controls the assets listed here. Your name remains, but only as a formality. You have no real authority." Exactly what I had feared. Exactly what I had seen. "And Ethan?" I asked. Daniel leaned back slightly, studying me. "Your husband retains some operational access in the short term," he said, "but even that can be reassigned later." "So he's giving everything to her," I said. "Not exactly," Daniel replied. "He's moving it into a structure that removes you. Whether she keeps control or they share it, that depends on agreements we haven't seen yet." The words settled heavily between us, because they confirmed something deeper than betrayal. They confirmed intention. "Planning, design. Is it legal?" I asked. Daniel's expression shifted slightly. "It's aggressive," he said carefully. "And depending on how it was presented to you, it could cross into fraud, especially if there was deception involved in getting your signature." "There was," I said immediately. "He told me it was just a formality." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then we have leverage," he said. Leverage. The word felt unfamiliar, but powerful. "What do I do?" I asked. He leaned forward slightly, his tone steady. "First, you don't sign anything he said. Second, you gather every piece of financial information you can: accounts, statements, communications. Third," he paused, "we prepare to move before he does." My heart skipped. "Move how legally?" he said. "Protective filings, asset freezes if necessary, and if this escalates, litigation." The room felt smaller suddenly, more real, because this wasn't just a situation anymore. It was a fight. And for the first time, I wasn't on the losing side. "There's one more thing," Daniel added. I looked up. "What?" He slid the papers back toward me. "This level of planning," he said. "It usually comes with other risks." What kind of risks? His gaze held mine. Tax exposure, hidden accounts, potential financial misconduct. My chest tightened. "You think there's more?" I think he said carefully, "that men who go this far don't usually stop at one line." Silence filled the room, because I knew he was right. I had already seen enough to understand that, but hearing it out loud made it undeniable. I stood slowly gathering the folder. "What's next?" I asked. Daniel gave a small, confident nod. Now he said we stop him before he finishes what he started. And as I walked out of that office, the weight of everything still sat heavy in my chest. The betrayal, the anger, the pain. But beneath all of it, there was something new, something steady, something dangerous. Because now, I wasn't just reacting to his plan. I had one of my own. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I already knew how this was going to go. Not every word, not every reaction, but the outcome. Because for the first time since all of this began, I wasn't walking into the conversation hoping for the truth. I already had it. What I needed now was for Ethan to realize that. The house was quiet when I stepped inside. Lily wouldn't be home for another hour. Ethan's car was already in the garage. Of course it was. He had said he'd come home early to finish what he started. I set my bag down slowly, placing the folder on the kitchen table in the exact same spot as before. Then I waited. It didn't take long. I heard his footsteps coming down the stairs, steady and unhurried. "Hey," he called. "You're back." "In here," I replied. He walked into the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, that same controlled calm in his expression. The same man, the same mask. "Perfect timing," he said, glancing at the folder. "I cleared my schedule. We can get this done." I didn't move, didn't reach for the papers, didn't smile. And for the first time, he noticed. What he asked, his tone sharpening slightly. I met his eyes. "We need to talk." A small pause, then a slow exhale. "Julia," he said, already sounding tired, already preparing to manage the conversation. "We've already been through this." "No." I cut in my voice. Calm but firm. "We haven't." Something in my tone stopped him. Not loud, not emotional, just certain. He studied me for a second, then nodded slightly. "Okay," he said. "Talk." I reached for the folder, opening it deliberately, flipping to the first page. "Madeline Carter," I said, my finger resting just beneath her name. "Partner. Controlling interest. Carter Holdings." His expression didn't change, but his eyes did. Just a fraction. "You've been busy," he said. Not denial, not surprise, recognition. I held his gaze. "I went to see a lawyer this morning. That landed, I saw it. Not panic, not yet, but awareness." "Of course you did," he said quietly. Still controlled, still composed, but something underneath it had shifted. "You lied to me," I said. The words came out steady, stronger than I expected. This isn't a formality, it's a transfer, a complete reassignment of ownership and control. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He just listened. And that, more than anything, told me everything. "Say something," I said. He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "All right," he said, "just one word." But it changed everything, because it wasn't defensive, it wasn't explanatory. It was acceptance. "You want the truth?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, and he nodded like that was enough. "Fine," he said. "Yes, it's a transfer." The words hung in the air, heavy, final. "And Madeline," I pressed. "She's part of the structure," he said, "part of the structure." I repeated, my voice tightening now. "Or part of your life." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "They're not mutually exclusive," he said. My breath caught. Because that was it. That was the moment. The line he crossed without hesitation. "You're serious," I said, almost under my breath. He tilted his head slightly. "About what?" "About all of this," I snapped, my composure cracking for the first time. "About her. About replacing me." "I'm not replacing you," he said flatly. "Then what are you doing?" I demanded. He stepped closer, his expression hardening. "I'm protecting what I've built." The words hit me like a slap. "What we've built," I corrected. He shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "What I've built." The silence that followed was deafening, because there it was, the truth, stripped of pretense, stripped of excuses, stripped of everything I had spent years believing. "You think I didn't contribute?" I asked quietly. "I think," he said carefully, "that you made choices." "Choices," I repeated. "Yes," he said. "You stepped back. You let me handle things. You trusted me to run the financial side of our lives. And now you're using that against me," I asked. "I'm using reality," he replied. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Reality," I echoed. "You mean the part where you move everything out of my name and into hers? I mean the part where I secure assets in a way that protects them long term," he said. From me, I shot back. He didn't answer. And that silence was louder than anything he could have said. "Say it," I demanded. "Say what you actually mean." His jaw tightened. Then he did. "You're not equipped to handle this level of complexity," he said. The words were calm, measured, delivered like a fact, and they broke something inside me in a way I hadn't expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were calculated, designed. You really believe that, I said. I know that, he replied. I let out a small disbelieving laugh. And Madeline is, I asked. She understands the business, he said. And you understand her, I added. His silence confirmed it, again. How long, I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. A while, he said, a while I repeated. That's what you're going with. He exhaled slowly. Does it matter? The question hit harder than anything else, because to him, it didn't. The timeline, the betrayal, the years of lies, none of it mattered, only the outcome. I watched you, I said quietly, at that apartment. That got his attention. His eyes sharpened. You followed me, he asked. I saw you with her. I continued. I saw the way you looked at her. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he didn't deny it. I wasn't hiding it as well as I thought, he said. A strange kind of honesty. Too late, too empty. And the plan, I asked. What was that? Just erase me. Quietly, legally. That's not what this is, he said. Then what is it? I demanded. It's evolution, he said. The word hung there, cold, detached. Like he was talking about a business strategy, not a marriage. Evolution. I repeated, my voice breaking now, despite everything. Yes, he said, things change, structures change, people change, and I'm just what I asked. Outdated. He didn't answer directly, but he didn't need to, because I already knew. And Lily, I asked suddenly, where does she fit into your evolution? That made him pause. Just for a second. She's my daughter, he said. That doesn't change, but everything else does, I pressed. He didn't respond. Again. And again that silence said everything. I took a step back, the distance between us suddenly feeling necessary, because the man standing in front of me wasn't the one I had married, or maybe he was. And I had just never seen him clearly before. You really thought I'd sign it, I said. I thought you trusted me, he replied. I did, I said. The past tense landed harder than I expected. His expression shifted slightly, not regret, not quite. Something else, something closer to annoyance. Then sign it now, he said. Just like that. No apology, no explanation, just expectation. I stared at him, at the man who had built a second life behind my back, who had planned to remove me from my own, who still believed he could control the outcome. And for the first time, I smiled. Not softly, not uncertainly, but with something he hadn't seen before. No, I said. And this time, there was no doubt. Ethan didn't expect me to smile. I saw it in the way his expression shifted, just for a second, when the word no left my mouth and didn't waver. Not the hesitant no he had heard before. Not the emotional one he could dismantle, redirect, reshape. This one was different, final, and he felt it. You don't mean that he said, his voice quieter now, but edged with something sharper. I do, I replied calmly. Silence stretched between us again, but this time it wasn't filled with uncertainty. It was filled with calculation. His and mine. Ethan straightened slightly, his posture shifting into something more deliberate. You're making a mistake, he said. No, I said, I'm correcting one. His jaw tightened. You don't understand the consequences of this, he continued. Delaying the process. I understand it perfectly. I cut in. Better than you think. Something in my tone stopped him. Not completely, but enough. Then explain it to me, he said, crossing his arms. I held his gaze. You created a structure designed to transfer control of our assets into Carter Holdings, I said, my voice steady. You positioned Madeline as the controlling partner, and you used my trust to try to get me to sign away my rights without fully understanding what I was agreeing to. His eyes narrowed slightly. Who told you that, he asked. I didn't need anyone to tell me, I replied, but I did have it confirmed. There it was. The second shift. Not just awareness, not just resistance. External involvement, legal, real, and this time I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not control. Concern. Small. Controlled. But there. You went to a lawyer, he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. His silence stretched longer this time, his mind clearly moving through possibilities, recalculating, adjusting. Good. Let him feel it. Let him realize the ground wasn't as stable as he thought. You're escalating this unnecessarily, he said, finally his tone tightening again. Am I asked. Yes, he snapped. This could have been handled privately. Privately, I repeated. You mean quietly. His expression hardened. I mean efficiently, he said. I let out a small, humorless breath. You mean without me realizing what you were doing? That's not fair, he replied quickly. No, I said. What's not fair is building a second life while pretending this one still exists. That hit, not because it surprised him, but because it was undeniable. He looked away for a moment, just long enough to reset. Then he turned back, his expression colder now. Fine, he said. Let's be clear then. The shift was complete. No more soft edges, no more careful explanations, just strategy. If you don't sign, he continued, you're going to complicate things. For both of us. I tilted my head slightly. How legal processes, he said. Delays, disputes, costs, I repeated. You're worried about costs, I'm worried about efficiency, he said sharply. No, I said quietly. You're worried about losing control. That landed harder than anything else, because this time, he didn't argue. Instead, he held my gaze, something darker settling in his expression. You're not thinking this through, he said. I am, I replied, for the first time. Silence again. Then his phone buzzed. The sound cut through the room like a sharp line. His eyes flicked down instinctively, then back to me. Too late. Go ahead, I said softly. Answer it. He hesitated, just for a second. Then he pulled the phone from his pocket, glancing at the screen. I didn't need to see the name. I already knew. Maddie, I said. He looked up sharply. And for the first time since this conversation began, he didn't hide it. He answered. Yeah, he said, his tone low. Not now. A pause. Then quieter no. It's not done yet. My chest tightened, because I could hear her voice faintly through the phone. Not the words, but the tone. Sharp, insistent, urgent. He turned slightly away, lowering his voice further. I said I'll handle it, he repeated. Another pause. Then no. She hasn't signed. The words hung in the air, louder than anything else he had said, because now it wasn't just me hearing it, it was her, and whatever he had promised her was starting to slip. He ended the call, quickly slipping the phone back into his pocket. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then I said quietly, She knows. He didn't respond. She knows about me, I continued, and she still agreed to this. That's not your concern, he said. It is when you're trying to give her control of my life, I replied. His jaw tightened again. You're being dramatic, he said. No, I said, I'm being accurate. Another silence. Longer this time. He looked at me differently now. Not as someone he could guide, not as someone he could manage, but as a variable, unpredictable. And that was new. Listen to me, he said finally, his tone shifting again, more direct, more urgent. If this turns into a legal situation, it's not going to go the way you think. I held his gaze. Maybe not, I said, but it's definitely not going to go the way you planned. That was the moment, the exact moment I saw it, the realization. Not complete, not fully formed, but enough. Enough for him to understand that something had changed, that I wasn't just resisting. I was moving, forward, strategically. You don't have as much leverage as you think, he said. I almost smiled again. Neither do you, I replied. He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, he stepped back, creating distance, not physical, situational. All right, he said quietly. The words were calm, too calm. We'll see. A warning or a promise, maybe both. He turned and walked out of the kitchen without another word. I listened to his footsteps fade, to the door close, to the silence that followed, and for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel uncertain. I didn't feel afraid. Because now everything was out in the open. The plan, the betrayal, the intention, and more importantly, the resistance. I walked back to the table, slowly placing my hand on the folder. The papers were still there, unchanged, unsigned, but everything else had shifted. Because this wasn't just about stopping him anymore. It was about taking back control, legally, strategically, completely, and somewhere in whatever version of his second life he thought was secure, things were already starting to unravel. The house felt different after that night. Not quieter, not emptier, just honest, like the illusion had finally been stripped away, leaving only what was real behind. Ethan didn't come back until late. I heard him moving downstairs at some point, then the faint sound of a door closing his office, not our bedroom. That more than anything told me everything. We weren't pretending anymore. And strangely, that made things easier. The next few days moved quickly. Not emotionally. Emotionally, everything felt slow, heavy, deliberate, but practically everything accelerated. Daniel filed the first motions within 48 hours. Protective measures, legal notifications, requests for financial disclosures. And just like that, Ethan's carefully controlled world started to shift. At first, he tried to maintain the same calm, the same composure, the same quiet confidence. But I could see it. In the way he checked his phone more often, in the way his tone sharpened during calls he thought I couldn't hear, in the way he stopped mentioning the documents altogether. Because now, he couldn't. The moment legal action entered the picture, everything changed. Silence wasn't control anymore. It was risk. One evening, about a week after our confrontation, he finally spoke. Not in the kitchen, not casually, but directly. "I got the notice," he said, standing in the doorway of the living room. I looked up from where I was sitting. "I assumed you would," I replied. His expression was harder now, less polished, less patient. "You didn't have to do this," he said. I held his gaze. "You already did," I answered. That landed. He stepped further into the room, his posture tense. "This is going to get messy," he said. "It already is," I replied. Silence stretched between us. Then, "What do you want?" he asked. The question surprised me, not because he asked it, but because of how. Not controlling, not guiding, asking, really asking. And for a moment, I considered it. Everything I had lost, everything he had tried to take, everything that had been built on lies. Then I answered. "I want what's mine," I said. His jaw tightened. "That's not how this works anymore," he replied. I almost smiled. Actually, I said it is. Because now the structure he had built wasn't just his to control. It was under review, under scrutiny, under law, and that was something he hadn't planned for. Not fully, not like this. The following weeks unfolded like a slow unraveling, not dramatic, not explosive, but precise, calculated. Every document Daniel uncovered revealed more. Hidden accounts, unreported transfers, financial movements that didn't align with declared records. And with each discovery, Ethan's position weakened, not just legally but structurally, because the system he had built wasn't as clean as he thought. Madeline didn't disappear, but she changed. Her calls became less frequent, shorter, tense. Whatever agreement they had was starting to strain under pressure, and for the first time I realized something important. She wasn't in control either, not completely. She had been part of the plan, yes, but she had also trusted Ethan, just like I had. And that made her vulnerable. Not innocent, but not untouchable. One afternoon I saw her, not at the apartment, not from a distance, but in person, at Daniel's office. She walked in as I was leaving. For a moment we both froze. Recognition passed between us instantly. No introductions needed, no explanations required. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Not arrogance, not triumph. Uncertainty. Then she straightened slightly, her composure returning. "This doesn't have to turn into a war," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, familiar. I met her gaze. "It already did," I replied. A pause, then quieter. You don't know everything she said. I held her eyes. I know enough, I answered. And then I walked past her. Because whatever version of the truth she thought I needed wasn't going to change mine. By the time everything settled months later, the outcome wasn't explosive, it wasn't dramatic, but it was decisive. The assets Ethan had tried to move secured, reevaluated, redistributed under legal oversight, not erased, not lost, protected. Ethan didn't lose everything, but he lost control, and for someone like him, that was everything. Our marriage didn't end in one moment. It ended in a series of quiet decisions. Documents filed, conversations avoided, rooms no longer shared, until one day, it was simply over. No more pretending, no more waiting, no more illusions. Lily took it hard. Of course she did. But I told her the truth. Not every detail, not every betrayal, but enough. Enough for her to understand that sometimes people don't break suddenly. They drift, they change, and sometimes they choose something else. But we're okay, I told her, and for the first time in a long time, I meant it. Because we were, not the same, not untouched, but stronger, clearer, real. The house stayed, not because of the structure, not because of the assets, but because it was ours. Truly, finally. And as for me, I changed too. Not overnight, not completely, but in the way that mattered. I stopped assuming trust. I started understanding it. I stopped stepping back. I started standing in my own place. Because the truth is, the moment I saw her name above mine was the moment everything ended. But it was also the moment something else began. Something stronger, something clearer, something I should have had all along, myself. Life has a way of revealing the truth when we least expect it, and often in the smallest details we almost ignore. A name on a document, a sentence that doesn't sit right, a feeling we try to push away. The lesson isn't just about betrayal, it's about awareness, about understanding that trust should never mean silence, that love should never require you to step back from your own lives. And that no matter how carefully someone tries to rewrite your place in the story, you always have the power to take it back. So tell me, what would you have done if you were in Julia's place? Would you have signed, or would you have stopped? If this story made you feel something, don't forget to subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes the stories we tell are the ones that remind us who we really are.